Thanks its listener sponsors, and 5 Nines, a locally owned cloud service provider of enterprise-level IT infrastructure consulting, hosting, and management services. On the web at 5nines.com. Phone number 512-1000.
Did you know you can listen to any WORT music show for up to 2 weeks after broadcast?
And our news and talk shows are available on demand for 2 months or more.
Play them directly from our website or any streaming, networked, or online device.
There's never a charge and no account or login is required.
Stream whole programs from start to finish as often as you like. Sorry, but music shows are only available for 2 weeks and cannot be downloaded due to copyright restrictions.
Shows are listed in chronological order, but you can also sort them from oldest to newest and by any genre. So if you want to hear the latest news on demand, hip-hop or blues during daylight hours, folk and jazz at night, or rock and john anytime, you can.
Just go to WORTFM.org, click Audio Archives, and look for the program you want. Most music shows have playlists online to help you identify that song you just can't get out of your head.
So no need to wait or stay up late. Listen to what you want, whenever you want, through our on-demand audio archives. Enjoy a cup of WORT anytime at WORTFM.org.
Welcome to the Access Hour, where each week WORT offers you the opportunity to fly your program over the radio. The Access Hour is WORT's commitment to community access to the airwaves. For this hour, we have turned the airwaves over to a member of the public. The views expressed on the Access Hour do not represent the views of the station, its staff, programmers, or the board of directors. We'd like this show to be as unpredictable as possible, so we need your creative ideas. It's a fair trade. You give us what you've got, and we give you the facilities and any help you need to get your program airborne. So let your mind wander and wonder. And when the inspiration for some pretty good radio glows with a clear, bright light, get in touch. Just go to WORTFM.org and look on the left side for Sign Up to Host an Access Hour. Programs are scheduled first come, first served. And now it's time to begin another foray into the freest form program on the WORT schedule, the Access Hour.
You better pray to the Lord when you see those flying saucers. It may be the coming of the judgment day. It's a sign, there's no doubt, of the trouble that's about. So I say, my friends, you'd better start to pray. They're a terrifying sight as they fly on day and night. It's a warning that we'd better mend our ways. You'd better pray to the Lord when you see those flying saucers. It may be the coming of the judgment day. Someone's foolish dream, or maybe they were sent down here from Mars. If you just stop and think, you'd realize just what it means. They're more than atom bombs or falling stars. And though the war may be true, there's unrest and trouble brewing, and those flying saucers may be just a sign that if peace doesn't come, it will be the end of some. So repent today, you're running out of time. When you see a saucer fly like a comet through the sky, you should realize the price you'll have to pay. You'd better pray.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Fred Olson. I'm 66 years old, and I have backgrounds in naval weapons target acquisition and missile guidance technology, nuclear power plant technology and regulation, high-energy materials, pyrotechnics, public interest law, mediation, and I'm also very proud to have worked in the late 1970s with a transportation pilot program that paved the way for better mobility and community integration for elderly, differently abled, and low-income persons. I have been an activist since the age of 16. Tonight I'll give a rambling talk on where we are, how we got here, where I think we should be going on the subject of UFOs. Get a paper and pencil. Take a few notes. Download this show. Do some of your own research. There's room for you at the table. Right off the bat, I don't have all the answers. In fact, I have very few answers. Just like you, I don't know what's flying around in our skies. Just like you, I don't know who's operating them. And just like you, I don't know the full extent of our military, government, and industry's interaction with them. In 1984, I became aware of thousands of pages of UFO-related government documents released through congressional committee hearings on intelligence agency misconduct and criminal activities. In 1989, I started asking government agencies to verify documents I already possessed copies of and to make requests for unreleased records. This culminated in my 1992 Freedom of Information Act case in federal court with the National Security Agency. Case number 92 C-318-S. I asked the National Security Agency for an uncensored copy of the blacked-out 80-page affidavit of Eugene F. Yates, Chief of Office of Policy. Yates is spelled Y-E-A-T-E-S. Yates. You can find this document on the Internet at the National Security Agency's website. And as I said, that's from a 1980 Freedom of Information Act lawsuit where the NSA explained to a federal judge in an above top-secret affidavit exactly why the topic of UFOs is classified above the H-bomb. In my case, the court's decision was not to release the Yates affidavit, and in fact, to continue to make it secret until the year 2030, but some interesting things were revealed by NSA in response to interrogatory questions. Where are we? Where is the human race with regards to generally known UFO knowledge? Some people would say that we're in a very exciting time. After all, in 2017, the New York Times began to print articles about UFO encounters with Navy planes and ships during sea exercises. A Pentagon UFO program chief quit his job and released video footage documenting these encounters. Not only that, but the government was in possession of recovered UFO materials not of this earth stored in special warehouse facilities. One of the Defense Intelligence Agency's top operatives, Luis Elizondo, resigned from his position as the head of a UFO project at the Pentagon called the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, or AATIP for short. He then joined an organization billing itself as a media company called the To the Stars Academy of Arts and Sciences. Elizondo brought with him 2 U.S. Navy videos, which were also covered in the New York Times and other mainstream news outlets. A third video was later released. These videos have been verified by the U.S. Navy as real and authentic. According to Mr. Elizondo, the AATIP program found 5 observable characteristics of UFOs that made them of national security concern and worth reporting and studying. Number 1, anti-gravity lift. Unlike known aircraft, these objects have been sighted overcoming the Earth's gravity with no visible means of propulsion. They also lack any flight surfaces, such as wings. In the Nimitz incident, witnesses described the crafts as tubular, shaped like a tic-tac breath mint. In the gimbal incident, witnesses described the crafts as a square inside a sphere. Number 2, sudden and instantaneous acceleration. These objects may accelerate or change direction so quickly that no human pilot could survive the G-forces. They would be crushed. In the Nimitz incident, radar operators say that they tracked one of the UFOs as it dropped from the sky at more than 30 times the speed of sound. Number 3, hypersonic velocities without signatures. If an aircraft travels faster than the speed of sound, it typically leaves signatures, like vapor trails and sonic booms. Many UFO accounts by trained observers note the lack of such evidence. Number 4, low observability or cloaking. Even when objects are observed, getting a clear and detailed view of them, either through pilot sightings, radar, or other means, remains difficult. Witnesses often only see the glow or haze around them. Number 5, transmedium travel. Some UFOs have been seen moving easily in and between different environments, such as space, the Earth's atmosphere, and bodies of water. Some have even been observed going into the Earth. Do they originate from China? Or from some other earthly country? If our leaders really believe that, I do not think that we would be in a shin-kicking tariff and trade sanction war with them. We'd be making nice until we had a better idea what was going on. Since the December 2017 New York Times articles, mainstream media such as, but not limited to, The Washington Post, NPR, CBS, NBC, ABC, Fox, Politico, the cable news channels, and many others have all carried some coverage of this topic, but with little follow-up, giving the British royal family's antics considerably more coverage. But what we got was still unprecedented in a history of media suppression on the topic of UFOs. In October 2019, the To the Stars Academy of Arts and Sciences entered into a Cooperative Research and Development Agreement, or CRADA, with the United States Army to study alleged recovered UFO metamaterials obtained from a civilian source. According to the contract, over the last year, progress reports have been generated, but they are not available to the public, with no guarantee that they will ever be released to the public. After a June 2020 Senate hearing, Senator Marco Rubio requested the release of video footage of unexplained aerial vehicles that have been collected by the United States Navy. On June 24, 2020, the Intelligence Committee voted to require the United States intelligence community and the United States Department of Defense to publicly track and analyze data collected on unexplained aerial vehicles. A report from the task force will be issued to the Intelligence Committee 180 days after the passage of the Intelligence Authorization Act. Deputy Secretary of Defense David Norquist will be helping to oversee the task force. Politicians use this strategy all the time as a delaying tactic. We need to form a committee to study this. When the problems and solutions, the basic questions and answers, are right out there in the open. This is not a drip in UFO disclosure. This is delaying disinformation to slow things down from their too fast for the powers that be flow. Assets need to be protected. The people who initiated and participated in the cover-up need time to live out their lives without being punished. That's where we are. The release of UFO information is in the hands of the military intelligence complex and the to the Stars Academy of Arts and Sciences, with the rest of the corporate media sphere headed by the New York Times. Here is the distilled story of what we are being told with regard to UFOs. Strange things are flying in our skies. We just noticed now. We had our thumbs up our butts for the last 70 years on this subject. We don't know anything. We know nothing. Nothing. We need to study this for several years, and then draft congressional reports and argue about it. It's a slow drip of delaying disinformation. UFOs are real, but we have no idea what's going on, and we need to form task forces and committees. Somehow that's not nearly as dramatic as the UFO disclosure that I've always imagined, personally and culturally. Information shepherding and control is exerted over all forms of media considered to have large enough and important enough demographic groups. In 1977, Carl Bernstein published an expose of a CIA program known as Operation Mockingbird, a covert program involving more than 400 American journalists who carried out for 25 years assignments from the Central Intelligence Agency. Bernstein also found that in many instances, CIA documents revealed that journalists were engaged to perform tasks for the CIA with the consent of their management, the management of America's leading news organizations. CIA Director William Casey famously said at a presidential cabinet meeting, "We'll know our disinformation program is complete when everything the American public believes is false." Glenn Greenwald, the man who broke the Edward Snowden story, said, and I quote, "Years of major claims and narratives from the U.S. media were utter frauds." Greenwald also underlines the highly dangerous trend of news outlets, I'm quoting here, repeating the mistake of the Iraq War by blindly relying on the claims of security state agents, but far worse, now employing them in their newsrooms to shape the news. It's virtually impossible to turn on MSNBC or CNN without being bombarded by former generals, CIA operatives, FBI agents, and NSA officials who now work for these networks as commentators and increasingly as reporters. We're experiencing what are called limited hangouts. The military-industrial complex and the intelligence community have been caught with their pants down, red-handed. So they tell a few things the public already knows, like they're admitting something big. Maybe they even tell a few but inconsequential things we didn't know, so the public really feels they got something. Everyone goes away happy. The public has learned secret stuff from a chastened group that promises to be good forevermore and, of course, so transparent, when they really haven't told us much we didn't know or suspect before. We're still in the dark. All the questions we had before are still there, staring us in the face. I have not come away from the last 3 years of UFO disclosure feeling like I knew more than I started. There are many repeated and uninformative phrases. In a so far mostly successful effort to remain sane and happy, I like Confucius's wise advice to act as if you are a young student and to inquire about the ceremonies as if you know nothing about them. I can be comfortable with my own ignorance because I am, in fact, ignorant, and I accept that. The UFO can of worms, or rabbit hole if you prefer, leaves us in the unenviable position of having a great deal of unverified information, a little bit of evidence, and a hall of mirrors provided by some of our own people working against us. At this time, even with decades of study and outright participation in this mess, I still have only two inadequate classifications for any explanations of the phenomena. Number 1, possible. Number 2, seems like more than just possible. At this time, even with decades of study and outright participation in this mess, I still have only two inadequate conclusions. Number 1, the UFO phenomena exists, and in many forms. Number 2, governments and defense industries lie about it, shamelessly, to our faces. No individual explanation, set of sightings, hypotheses, theories may turn out to be true in a sphere that is infested with disinformation. I can tell you that the "we know nothing and we need to study this" narrative is false upon the face of it. False. The U.S. government has generated records related to this phenomenon for nearly 80 years and has collected information under several programs during that 80 years, including Project Sign, Project Grudge, the CIA's Robertson Panel, Project Blue Book, the University of Colorado Condon Study, the so-called UFO Working Group, contracts with Stanford Research Institute, Battelle National Laboratories, the Brookings Institute, and of course contracts with many defense contractors to this day. Earlier UFO projects were closed out with "it ended," or "it was shut down," or even "it was decided that UFOs were not a threat to national security and expending government funds for the study of them is not in the national interest." "We know nothing." Or even further, we recovered some UFO records and technology, but in 70 years we haven't figured any of it out, and we don't know anything about where it comes from or who it belongs to. That's still the official narrative. We have a right to know how our money is spent, and quite a lot has been spent. Though these rights have been severely limited by legislation and court decree, as well as disobedient, lying, law-breaking agencies, these rights still exist, at least on paper and in principle. Letting this elite decide what's good for us without regard for our wishes shows that we're living in a centralized decision-making Soviet-like society. I am not comfortable with pretending that we have any real say here. Any suggestion that this is somehow okay, especially that information and opportunity of such magnitude should be withheld from us to prop up a power elite that perhaps should fail and deserves to fail, is morally reprehensible in my view. Perhaps that secrecy was a good idea temporarily 70 years ago, but it seems to be a very bad idea now. If these people had any shame, we'd have had UFO disclosure long ago. They are, in fact, shamelessly lying to our faces with the consent of the mainstream media. I have direct experience of being lied to by the National Security Agency on this topic in federal court, and it doesn't get any more shameless than that. No, sir, no, ma'am. It's not a value judgment, that's a fact. These folks do not go home and cry themselves to sleep every night over moral issues. They do their dirty work without shame. It appears that we are being systematically programmed by the government with the help of mainstream media to accept that UFOs are real. Clearly not the alien hypothesis part of it, at least not just yet, but definitely the hardware part of it, at least for now. But why? Something's up with UFO disclosure, and whatever it is, it's being highly controlled and manipulated by someone at a very high level for a specific reason. So clearly, it's not just a matter of our government suddenly having a change of heart and deciding to come clean for the sake of transparency. Why are we having UFO disclosure now? Speculation has it that Chinese hacker penetration of Defense Department and defense contractor computer systems has compromised classified UFO information. Also, the registration of UFO-related patents by military and other researchers, most notably one Dr. Salvatore Pais, which is spelled P-A-I-S, and the unusual way that these patents were treated and accepted by the U.S. Patent Office indicates the beginnings of a rush to not only exploit this technology, but to own it. It's worth noting that Luis Elizondo of the To the Stars Academy of Arts and Sciences has 2 patents. Is the commercialization of spaceflight forcing controlled disclosure? Could this be some sort of preemptive damage control for something that will be inevitably witnessed in space or on the moon? Does this recent formation of the U.S. Space Force play a role in any of this? How did we get here? How did we get here? Project Sign produced the estimate of the situation in the 1940s, a UFO report which the United States Air Force Chief of Staff General Hoyt S. Vandenberg ordered all copies of burned. A few survived. Then there was Project Grudge. Then there was Project Blue Book, the CIA's Robertson Panel, the University of Colorado Condon Study, the Military Intelligence UFO Working Group, and contracts with the Stanford Research Institute, Brookings Institution, and Battelle National Laboratories. Contracts with contractors like Lockheed Martin, Bigelow Advanced Aerospace Studies. We had the formation of AATIP. We have foreign government studies from Russia, France, the UK, and Brazil. Private studies such as those sponsored by Lawrence Rockefeller and MIT. The Catholic Church has a serious interest with a designated spokesperson. There has been serious study which has produced much data, released and unreleased. Where did all this unreleased data and these documents go? Where is all the gun camera film footage from American military pilots going back to World War II? Where are all the other government-held UFO films and images that are referenced in released and verified documents? Let's jump around a bit in time and return to the present official narrative. So far, we have the 2017 New York Times revelations of the Defense Intelligence Agency officer Luis Elizondo and the release and later official verification of 3 U.S. Navy aircraft videos with the pilot's radio communications. The videos showing objects known as Tic Tac, Gimbal, and Go Fast. We have the formation of the To the Stars Academy of Arts and Sciences, or TTSA, a self-described entertainment company. TTSA consists of people such as Tom DeLonge, a member of the musical group Blink-182, Luis Elizondo, former DIA officer and former head of AATIP, Dr. Hal Puthoff, who worked on UFO-related projects with the Stanford Research Institute and the Pentagon, Jim Semivan, with 25 years' experience as a CIA operations officer, Steve Justice, Director for Integrated Systems at the Lockheed Martin Aeronautics Skunk Works, their super-secretist facility. A rock star and some spooks. Largely people who've already participated in the cover-up. It should be noted that over the years, a great deal of, possibly the majority of UFO information and technology was given into the hands of the defense industry, private companies, so that the government doesn't have to answer questions or Freedom of Information Act requests about it. This situation culminated in the Admiral Wilson affair, in which Admiral Thomas Wilson, Defense Intelligence Agency chief and member of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, was told by private industry that he did not have the clearance to be given information about UFO projects. Even presidents don't have the clearance for UFO information. In the past, there appears to be two UFO factions behind the scenes. Military-based programs, at least the publicly divulged portions of programs like Grudge, Sign, and Blue Book, were created in direct response to outside pressure. The other faction is an ultra-secret, non-military-run UFO program created in response to internal pressure to maintain technological superiority over our adversaries and our friends during a very anxious and tense period of the Cold War. Though all secret government programs are highly compartmentalized and stovepiped by design in order to maintain utmost secrecy and control within their respective areas of influence, the ultra-secret program in particular went to much greater lengths to maintain secrecy, in some cases going far beyond what can be considered ethical or even legal. As a result, not only did the public not have any knowledge of the ultra-secret UFO program or even the secret military-run UFO program, but the government in general, including the military, likely had little or no official knowledge of the ultra-secret UFO program. This schism within the government, and within the Pentagon in particular, has been evident for years and was clearly illustrated by the Admiral Wilson affair. Government and private industry, at times very separately, have been working to replicate the observed technology of these advanced aerospace vehicles. That isn't in doubt. Lockheed Martin's Advanced Development Projects, ADP, known unofficially as the Skunk Works, is a secret aeronautical research facility in Burbank, California. Benjamin Robert Rich joined the Skunk Works in 1954 to help design various aircraft. He's considered the father of stealth technology, designing the first military stealth aircraft, and he became the second director of the Skunk Works, holding that position from 1975 until his retirement in 1991. Mr. Rich stated, "There are two types of UFOs, the ones we build and the ones they build. I'm a believer in both categories. I feel everything is possible." Ben Rich wrote that he believed that the American public, begin quote, could not handle the truth, end quote, about UFOs and ETs. However, he changed his mind toward the end of his life and felt that keeping the secret could be more of a danger to, begin quote, citizens' personal freedom under the United States Constitution than the presence of off-world visitors themselves, end quote. During a 1993 alumni speech at UCLA, Ben Rich stated, begin quote, "We already have the means to travel among the stars, but these technologies are locked up in black projects that it would take an act of God to ever get out to benefit humanity. Anything you can imagine, we already know how to do." At the end of that speech, Rich said, "We now have the technology to take ET home." When he was later questioned about these comments, Mr. Rich further stated, We know how to travel to the stars. We found an error in the equations. It will not take a lifetime to do it. Only 10 days before his death, Ben Rich stated that, begin quote, "We have things out in the desert that are 50 years beyond what you can comprehend. If you have seen it on Star Wars or Star Trek, we've been there, done that, or decided it wasn't worth the effort. We have about 4,500 people at Lockheed Skunk Works. What have they been doing for the last 18 to 20 years? They're building something." End quote. It bears repeating that Admiral Thomas Wilson, Defense Intelligence Agency chief and member of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, was told by private industry that he did not have the clearance to be given information about special access UFO projects. Even presidents don't have the clearance for UFO information. Why all this secrecy? Well, it's because we can't let aliens, or commies, or whoever is Hitler this week, know that we know anything. And if we know that they know anything, we can't let them know that we know. That would give them an advantage. This is a real answer from the National Security Agency. The CIA's Robertson panel and the Brookings Institution study concluded that the public could not handle the truth about UFOs and ET. Just post-World War II, this would have been a good excuse for secrecy. Suddenly the biggest kid on the block isn't the biggest anymore. The late Lambros D. Kalimahos, Callimahos, Kalimahos, NSA employee and founder of the Dundee Society, a group within NSA, authored a monograph for restricted intra-agency distribution in 1968, entitled UFO Hypothesis and Survival Questions, which you can also find at the National Security Agency's website on the Internet. This document is a 7-page Socratic discussion of the reality of UFOs, cultural interaction, and caution. The way a culture interacts with a technologically superior culture can mean the difference between the failure of many indigenous people to hold their cultures together and the success of the Japanese in maintaining their culture after contact with the Europeans. The Japanese culture survived. They kept their identity. They equalized the differences between them and the other people. Their method? 1. Full and honest acceptance of the nature of the inferiorities separating you from the advantages of the other people. 2. Complete national solidarity in all positions taken in dealing with the other culture. 3. Highly controlled and limited intercourse with the other side, doing only those actions advantageous to the foreigner, which you are absolutely forced to do by circumstances. 4. A correct but friendly attitude towards the other people. 5. A national eagerness to learn everything possible about the other culture, its technological and cultural strengths and weaknesses. This often involves sending selected groups and individuals to the other's country to become one of his kind, or to even help him in wars against other adversaries. 6. Adopting as many of the advantages of the other people as you can, and doing it as fast as possible while still protecting your own identity by molding each new knowledge increment into your own cultural cast. Kalimahos felt that the scientific and intelligence communities were taking far too leisurely an approach to the problem of UFOs, and concluded his monograph with what has become known as the tale of the rattler, which I shall here quote. If you're walking along a forest path and someone yells, "Rattler!" your action would be immediate and defensive. You would not take time to speculate before you acted. You'd have to treat the alarm as if it were a real and immediate threat to your survival. Investigation would become an intensive emergency action to isolate the threat and determine its precise nature. It would be geared to developing adequate defensive measures in a minimum amount of time. It would seem that a little more of this survival attitude is called for in dealing with the UFO problem. That was Lambros D. Kalamajos of the National Security Agency. As I said before, 50, 60, 70 years ago, this would have been a really good excuse for secrecy. Suddenly the biggest kid on the block isn't the biggest anymore. But it is not a good excuse more than 50 years later. Even if the military-industrial intelligence community complex has had their thumbs up their butts and learned little or nothing, it's not a good excuse any longer. It's a cover-up dangerous to the people that they say they're trying to protect. Kalamajos' wisdom is abused by the idea that any new technological gains must be controlled from the top down to protect current interests such as fossil fuel and banking sectors. Where does it appear that we are headed with respect to UFOs? We may end up at one of two places. Number one, think of UFO disclosure as a leaky faucet that just eventually stops. In the hands of government, an entertainment company, TTSA, and a historically compliant media will continue to receive a narrative of ignorance. Oh, we've ignored this problem for 70 years. We need to form task forces and committees. Tell you anything? Fat chance. Give us money. Perhaps some sanitized technology will come dribbling out, owned and controlled by the present power structure. Or perhaps, number two, a perceived UFO threat. That's right, a threat. Members of the To the Stars Academy have mentioned veiled threat narratives as a reason why they can't reveal more information to us. Guests on news shows such as Christopher Mellon, former Deputy Secretary of Defense and member of the Mellon banking family, have also outlined veiled threat narratives. Exaggerated threat narratives presented to Congress have driven military defense contractor and intelligence agency budgets since the end of World War II. At one point during the 1985 Geneva summit, President Ronald Reagan and Soviet Premier Mikhail Gorbachev took a break from negotiations to take a walk. Only their private interpreters were present, and for years the details of what they talked about were kept secret. Reagan asked Gorbachev, "What would you do if the United States were suddenly attacked by someone from outer space? Would you help us?" Gorbachev replied, "No doubt about it." Later, Reagan famously said in a 1987 speech to the United Nations, "Perhaps we need to recognize some outside universal threat to make us recognize our common bonds. I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world." End quote. In addition to the threat of the unknown, we need to consider this question. Would one nation having sole possession of UFO materials trigger human conflict as foreign adversaries risked war to attempt to gain access to this game-changing technology? This could also increase pressure for more centralized world authority, something beloved by every member of the "we own the world, so we should run it" clubs, such as the World Economic Forum, Trilateral Commission, Bilderberg Group, Council on Foreign Relations, Royal Institute of International Affairs, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Where should we be going? What should we be doing? For the purposes of this presentation, I'm putting aside other weirdness and putting aside any detailed UFO hypotheses or theories advanced by various writers, mostly due to lack of hard evidence. Seems safest to go with some logical or even proven givens and some general strategies. Of course, things could turn out to be completely beyond logic or known historical and social principles. But you can't make any plans with that kind of attitude. Throwing UFOs into a bin with every weird thing that comes along and saying it's all connected is what I call the pan-weirdness hypothesis. It may well turn out to be true. It may well turn out to be true that many weird things are all connected. But I'm sticking to a nuts and bolts approach just to keep things simpler and saner. As if that wasn't hard enough for us, add a bunch of jokers throwing false data into the mix. From amateurs who fake UFO pictures and videos on their smartphones, to government and industry professionals like Richard Doty, D-O-T-Y, of the U.S. Air Force's verified disinformation efforts. Where should we be going? What should we be doing? The American people should continue to press for the release of UFO information and greater transparency on this subject. The American people should sue for redress of illegal actions committed by government and industry during the last 70 years. It's also time for individual researchers and activists to consider suits for intimidation, intrusive overt and covert surveillance, character assassination campaigns, sneak and peek break-ins, and obvious lies and perjury committed by U.S. government agencies in response to Freedom of Information Act inquiries and past lawsuits. A pattern of egregious criminal behavior is obvious. Restraint of trade and loss of opportunity are only the beginning. Consider the possibilities of increased biological knowledge, increased medical knowledge, improved health care. Consider the possibility that we might avert or mitigate environmental problems with new energy and transportation technologies. Diplomats and military planners and the intelligence community set great store by developing contingency plans. As these people are not likely to share these plans with us so as to better boss us around after we've been whacked with a 2x4 of whatever the contingency plan is supposed to respond to, isn't it a good idea for us to spend some time developing different UFO disclosure contingency plans for ourselves, various professional communities we may belong to, and the public? Contingency plans that are useful and evolving in response to new data seem like a good idea to me. With such small groups handling our contingency plans in secret, with little or no oversight, there's a lot of room for bad planning and even neglect, especially failures to add and take into account new data. I feel that it's in our interest to make sure this does not happen, because a small group of unsupervised powerful people screw up when we're not looking. The less exciting, more worky part of this whole thing is figuring out our part. Do we want to just be passive observers or active participants? And once we know more, will we be passive observers or participants in a life beyond our usual local boundaries, interacting with new people, technology, new cultures? How can we press for the release of UFO information and greater transparency on the subject? Well, you could just talk to friends and family, or even write letters to your local newspaper and post stuff on social media. And that might be fine for the average person. It will unfortunately not have a very large effect on the situation, and certainly not the effect we desire. It's my opinion that we should get the TTSA U.S. Army Cooperative Research Contract into the hands of the nation's and world's material scientists at universities and other research institutions. This contract is proof that the U.S. government takes UFO technology seriously and is engaged in efforts to duplicate it. It is therefore prima facie important and scientifically significant. A small but powerful group from materials science could be very helpful. Another thing would be what I call the neener strategy. An argument can be made that much about UFOs should remain privileged information, even now. However, that information and existing secret policies and agreements remain in the hands of too few, and perhaps the wrong few. The Admiral Wilson revelations underscore this. I call it the neener strategy because it kind of says, Neener, you don't get to know, you're not in the club. There are people in positions of authority in our society, in science, medicine, military, government, business, and industry, who have spoken out on this. And for every one of them, there are 100 afraid to speak out, afraid to say that their very responsible jobs should have some sort of access to information about how to handle UFOs, the developing situation, and other anomalous phenomena, especially now that, since 2017, our supreme authorities have had to admit the reality of UFOs. A list of these folks could be identified and contacted to encourage them to press for the information that is critical to their positions of authority and policy making for all of us. How can they make good decisions if important information is withheld from them? We need to enlist the middle managers and upper management, our authorities in business, government, law enforcement, military, diplomatic corps, etc., who should know, but they don't. Get them jealous, and they'll crack that nut if anybody can. Journalists are a special case. For working journalists, the fear is that you won't have a job next week. Or in the case of independent journalists who sell their work to different newspapers, magazines, and websites, that no one will buy their work. Hey, no cloak and dagger velvet fist is necessary here. Editors, publishers, and owners are the men in black, not shadowy figures from a secret agency. Publishers, editors, and working journalists need to know that UFOs are no longer a taboo subject, that they are real, and that their reality brings with it the necessity to discuss them as a society in open discourse. At the top, at the elite level, have we identified who knows what we want to know? If we are going to rattle cages, let's choose the ones with animals in them who can tell us what we need to know. What about contact, diplomacy, trade, scientific and cultural exchange, finding our place in the larger society of life? These questions of who will control contact, communication, trade, scientific and cultural exchange are the ones that I will keep hammering at, pretty much because no one else is. I can't seem to find anyone who wants to do anything other than look backwards at the historical record, or to concentrate on the news of the moment coming from sources with their own history of concealment and deception. I feel that far too little time has been spent on planning strategies for post-contact, diplomacy, trade, cultural exchange, etc. These things have been left in the hands of very small groups representing tiny elites. People we have seen to be, shall we say, not our best moral examples, and perhaps not our best representatives. Not our best practical decision makers either, by the look of things today. These thoughts, researches, and decisions are too important to be left in the hands of a few. And as the people who one way or another end up paying for their activities, we should know more about what they're doing with our money and why. If there is a greater multipolar reality with many kinds and even orders of beings, it seems likely that there will be a spectrum of what we call morality among them. Unless we want to let a secretive group have control of contact, community, diplomacy, treaties, trade and cultural exchange, government must establish open, transparent activity with clear regulation in the public interest. Because we lack this, we must form a public diplomacy corps, however small, to be ready to deal with things in the public interest as opportunity becomes available. A public diplomacy corps also presses for disclosure so that they can do their work. When the government will not do something that's needed, it's up to us. It's up to the people. I think we have power. And that's one of the reasons why whomever is flying around in our skies hides from us. Maybe that power is only that of a dangerous animal to them. Maybe our quickness in change, invention, and societal development is threatening to a race many millennia old with slow technological and societal development. Our human mercurial rate of change could cause fear in an ultra-stable ancient society. Humans may have powers that we have no concept of, and until we know about and embrace that power, it cannot protect us. It can't give us an advantage. If more of us had full knowledge or even just better knowledge of the UFO problem, our best guardians could be more productively at work. Diplomacy and trade will probably not be smooth sailing at first. We need to know what our strengths are in this equation. We need to know what it is that whoever is flying around up there wants. Why are they here? When we know who they are, why they are here, and what they want, then we can have things like diplomacy and trade. Who owns the opportunities? Opportunity has legal value in our culture, a value not easily thrust aside for the opportunity of a few. The opportunities are vast. Our best minds, our best gifts are going unused to their best potential. Opportunity, value, and merit are being lost. We are often told as of late that the job market is about to undergo considerable and possibly catastrophic contraction. All those idle minds and idle hands are going to be waiting for opportunity. Lost opportunity has legal value. There isn't just one person or one company losing opportunity here. It's all of us. I've given a rambling talk on where we are, how we got here, and where I think we should be going on the subject of UFOs. I hope you got a paper and pencil and took a few notes. Download this program and listen to it again. Do some of your own research. There's room for you at the table. I hope I've challenged you to think and perhaps even entertained you a bit in the last hour. My name is Fred Olson. Good night.
You better pray to the Lord when you see those flying saucers. It may be the coming of the judgment day. It's a sign, there's no doubt, of the trouble that's about. So I say, my friends, you'd better start to pray.
You've been listening to the Access Hour. The Access Hour is WORT's commitment to community access to the airwaves. For this hour, we have turned the airwaves over to a member of the public. The views expressed on the Access Hour do not represent the views of the station, its staff, programmers, or the board of directors. Remember, though, that this show relies on your ideas. An application to produce a program can be found on the internet at WORTFM.org. Look on the left side for Sign Up to Host an Access Hour. Music, talk, comedy, drama, or whatever can be conveyed over the radio, the Access Hour is anything you want it to be.
Hey, this is James Lavelle, and you're checking out WORT 89.9 FM Madison Community Radio.
Looking for unique, socially responsible handmade gifts this year? If so, you can shop all your favorite vendors at the 24th Annual Fair Trade Holiday Festival. In true 2020 style, this year's virtual festival will be held online during the entire month of November, featuring specially selected fair trade businesses. Choose from hundreds of international products, the handiwork of weavers, knitters, metalworkers, woodcarvers, and creative artists from all around the world. Vendors will offer fair trade clothing, toys, foods, yarn, jewelry, books, cards, masks, ornaments, baskets, and home goods. This year you can shop from the comfort and safety of your home and find unique gifts that support your values. Celebrating its 24th year as your worker-friendly alternative, the Fair Trade Holiday Festival will take place November 1st through 30th. For more information, visit fairtrademadison.org or visit Fair Trade Holiday Festival on Facebook. This is WORT 89.9 FM, Madison.